Hey YouTube, this is another episode of Dog Shoes Garage. Today we're going to cover everybody's favorite topic, transmission fluid. Now I have a couple different types of transmission fluid here, sitting in front of a unique, this is the 99 Toyota Corolla. And what I want to cover is the first thing I always hear, and it's not wrong, it's not right, it's just kind of one of those it depends questions. People like to say, do I change my transmission fluid or not? So let me first say that the older vehicles, like my buddy and I had a 1970 Dodge Challenger in high school. We dropped the pan on that, drained out all the transmission fluid, and refilled it with fresh fluid. That was just the pan. There's also some in the torque converter. There's also some still inside the actual transmission itself in the line. So that dumping all of that out, that was the old school 70s, maybe even 80s way of doing it. I also did that with my turbo 350 transmission in my Chevy pickup that I had, which is the 79. That's how you used to do it. There was no drain plug on the bottom. You would drop the pan, which just means you take all the bolts out around the pan comes down, you replace the gasket, put new transmission fluid in through the dipstick. That's how the old way was done. That Challenger is still on the road today. My buddy, it's like a show car, but that's how we did it. It still works just fine. And we drove that as you would when you were 18 years old. So that shifts still to this day. So that whole like you can never drain it out, it'll ruin everything. That's not quite right. But it's also not right to say drain all the fluids out, take everything out, and then put a brand new bunch of fluids in. And the reason for that is because there are bands inside the transmission. I don't have any pieces to show you today. I wish I did. But inside that transmission, it is a very complicated system. And so trying to explain that to anybody else that doesn't get it is really complicated, and it's even I don't get it fully exactly. That's why I'm not a transmission mechanic. I just service what I can, and I hope that it doesn't break. But that said, I've never had transmission fluid problems or transmission problems except for one or two small things. I'm going to cover those in a second. But that technology of dumping it all out, replacing it all, was what everybody did for the longest time. Transmissions haven't really changed that much in the automatic transmission world. The CVT transmissions are different. That's a whole different thing, and I'm not going to get into those because I really try to avoid those like the plague. But for today, a classic way of working on your car nowadays, as in like let's say the 90s, 2000 to 2014s ish, they have this thing called a drain and fill. Very famous for Honda. Honda specifically, like I have a Honda Pilot 2013. This specific fluid is the fluid. If you can't read it, it's ATF DW1. This fluid is for Honda transmissions only. And when I had problems originally years ago, I had a 96 Honda Civic, and I got the smart idea of taking all the transmission fluid out that I could drain, doing a drain and fill, because it was shifting kind of rough. It was like 186,000 miles. So I drained it all out, and I put some of this stuff in. Because, when I was growing up in high school and college, we had Dextron 3 at the time. Well, just so you know, Dextron 6 is a fully synthetic version that's supposed to be backwards compatible and supposedly is what replaces Dextron 3. So I thought, I'll just put Dextron 3 in there. At the time, that seemed good. My transmission started shifting like crazy. Wasn't doing well at all. So then I started reading, and this was, like I said, about 10 years ago. I found out that the transmission fluid in this, while it's both pink and so is this one, they're formulated very differently. And that does actually matter. So I had to drain everything out and put this stuff in there. And after a couple drain and fills, which a drain and fill, if you don't know, there's a drain plug on the bottom of the transmission, at least in the Hondas and some of the Toyotas. And if you unplug that drain plug, all of the transfer stuff that's in the transmission fluid that's in the main part of the transmission that's sitting there kind of subtle, that comes out. It's just settled at the bottom. But what it doesn't get out of is everything inside the torque converter. It also doesn't get everything, like I said, inside the lines or anything else. So they say about a third of your transmission fluid is removed from a drain and fill. That's why most transmissions, like this transmission, probably has like 7 or 8 quarts of fluid-ish in there. I'm not too worried about how much it is, because what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to do a drain and fill. I'm going to drain out as much as drains out. I'm going to measure that, and then I'm going to put that amount back in. Knowing that this car has 200,000 miles on it and the previous owner didn't change the transmission fluid on this, that goes to the next burning question, and this is where everybody says, Don't change your transmission fluid. It's going to ruin the transmission. Well, I'm going to sacrifice this car for the sake of YouTube, and we're going to try it. I'm going to drain and fill this car. This is the 99 Toyota Corolla, 206,000 miles. We're going to drain all the fluid we can out of it. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to do what's called a flush, okay? I always like to say with mechanic world, most everything with flushing, leave that to the toilets. We don't flush stuff if we can help it. There's no reason to do so. The drain and fill is what the manual says to do. This is just draining fluid out and replacing a third of what is in there. And that way it all mixes together when you run the car again. I like to do this on my Pilot. I've had a shifting problem I think I've mentioned for a while now. And every time I do a drain and fill, I get about 10,000 miles. And then I start having that issue again. But it just kind of shifts erratically a little bit and then it stops. And it just doesn't feel like it's shifting right. But when I do a drain and fill, then it's fine for, like I said, 10,000 miles. So I'm going to sell that thing in the future because many reasons, mostly the upholstery, honestly. But the transmission, I have 140,000 miles on that thing now, and it's a good vehicle. All I got to do is just keep that transmission fluid, we'll say, fresh, because whenever it is getting older or whatever, there's something in there. I think there's a solenoid that maybe gets stuck. But either way, an easy fix for me. This stuff is about $7 a quart. When I do a drain and fill, first I get this from the dealer. Now you can get this on Amazon too, I believe. So if you want to go to Amazon, just buy it, have it overnight. But I like to go to the dealership as well because I like to ask them questions. There's some of the things I want to know. I used to go to Checker and O'Reilly and AutoZone and Napa. I used to go there a lot for parts. But I've learned in the past that since I live near a dealership, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to see how much the parts are different because this car was made with parts from Toyota that are specific for this car. Someone else manufacturing a part or trying to make it different is their best attempt, but it's not OEM. It's not exactly the same. And so I don't want to sit there and spend too much time working on a car if I don't have to. So the easiest thing for me, if it's not like $400, then that's a huge enough. And if the other one, let's say, is $50, then I'm going to buy the $50 part and just take a risk. But if it's my wife's car, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just probably drop the $400 because that way I know it's good to go. But with this particular one, this is a transmission fluid. This is for my Tundra. This is the WS. Now again, the reason I know this is the right transmission fluid for my Tundra is because I went ahead and called the dealership and I asked, hey, is this the right fluid? Can you tell me which one is the right fluid? Because they don't care that it doesn't work later on down the road. That's why the whole I'm going to take my car to a transmission place and get it flushed. What that entails is they take fluid for your car and then they run it through, running the car and running it all the way through to get all the fluid out. And it sounds really good and sexy, except for the fact that that machine has been hooked up to tons of other cars with different transmission fluid types. And when I swapped one of these two mistakenly, that was a catastrophic issue where I had shifting like crazy. And that was just between these two. That means they're formulated specifically. You do not want that in your transmission because your transmission is pretty much the number one to number two thing that's going to cost you the most on this car. Like if I had to swap this right now and took it to a shop to give me a new transmission, we're probably talking $4,000 to maybe $6,000. This car is not worth that. That would be absolutely stupid. So that to say, you go to the dealership, you can ask them, and then also look it up in your manual, and then also look it up online, just to make sure you have multiple points of the exact same information saying this is the right thing. Once you verify that and you're comfortable with that, use that fluid, and then look again, read your car. My Toyota, not the Tundra that I have, that is a 2008. That one doesn't have a dipstick, so I can't pull this dipstick in here and check what it is. It won't let me. It doesn't have one. So I've got to go underneath the truck, take out a plug, which I haven't done yet because I have 240,000 miles on that. And I have to tell you, I'm nervous too because I use that for towing. I use that for daily driving. So if I jack that transmission up, then that's going to cost me a fortune that I don't want to spend. So that's why I got the WS, which I know is the right kind. So I'm in step one of the right direction. Two, I got to have a little bit of faith because, stuff breaks. This is reality. This is life. On this earth, we've got things that break. If you want to go to the afterlife, that's a whole different thing. We're just talking cars today. But again, nothing that we do in this garage, other than faith, will last forever. So I got to just do what I can to keep that car on the road. But this is a good start because it's what the car is made for on my truck, we're saying. So I'm going to put this in my truck. and then I'm going to go ahead and do a drain and fill. So that way, some of whatever's in there is going to tell me, all right, this is really either yuck stuff in there and I'm going to replace some fluid. Otherwise, it's going to be pink, I'm hoping, which means the previous owner must have done this maybe 30, 50,000 miles ago and drained it out. Now, the interval for how often we should change our transmission fluid also sparks this massive debate, because people will go, oh, we got to change it every like 10 or every 30 or every 100,000 or somewhere in the range. And the phrase "it depends" is such an annoying phrase in life, but it really is the truth in this situation, because it does depend. If you're driving on the freeway 50 miles a day, your transmission is not going to get as much, damage as it would, or the fluid is not going to get as much as if it was daily driving in, like, say, Denver or Los Angeles. You're doing a lot of stop, go. There's a lot of shifting of the gears, but if you're just cruising like fourth gear for like 30 miles, your transmission does not do much work. Transmission fluid also gets hot and it does break down over time. That's how all this stuff works. It draws the heat out and allows it to cool down, but it also lubricates. So that's its job. But 100,000 miles is what they expect these cars nowadays to last. And so they're going to let you say, oh, it's a lifetime warranty. And you'll hear this, but it's true. It's the lifetime of the warranty of the car because they want you out of there. Nothing lasts forever. These fluids will not last forever. They will turn into slimy sludge over the next 600,000 miles. Probably 100,000 miles is still way too much for these fluids, especially if I'm towing or I'm racing or I'm doing anything. I have a teenager that just likes to rev the engine, okay? All those things mean you're going to wear stuff out faster. So in that case, you have to consider it does depend. And it is, like I said, a drain and fill is the best option for, I think, everything. How often depends on you. Like I told you, this car I'm going to do a drain, and I'm probably going to stick to, I like 30,000 miles. That seems like a good amount. My Tundra, I put 20,000 miles on it, but I've never, ever touched the fluid on the transmission. Because again, it's more of those, like, I don't have the time to do all that kind of stuff, and I certainly don't want to cause another problem because it's working. So if it's working, why would I break what's working? But that's not a good thing to think when we're talking about fluids in a car, because we should know eventually it will break down and will cause a problem and it's going to damage it. And so it does. There are several of those Tundras that have gone 1,000,000 miles, but they change their fluids. So I'm going to do that on the Tundra, but I'm also going to do that on this car. So that's what I wanted to discuss today. Do not just take some of this and have some some auto repair shop flush your transmission, or I promise you, you will have problems. Now, I also will say that you've got to look at your manual, look this stuff up and research, because in this particular car, it's crazy because this power steering takes this fluid. It takes Dextron 3. It even says it in the book, Dextron 3. And like I said, because Dextron 3 is now Dextron 6, I have drained the fluid out of that reservoir, which I will do in another video just to show you how it's done. I drained it out, replaced it with this. I've had no problems. Everything's steering, everything goes fine. I did the same thing with the brake fluid. I drained it out. I put some new brake fluid in. I didn't bleed the brakes because, again, I thought it's a closed system, so every time I push on the brakes, the fluid moves around. It's what fluid does. If I kind of think of the drain and fill, I'm going to save myself more time, because while this guy doesn't have ABS, other vehicles I have do, and I just don't want to screw with that because sometimes I'm alone. In fact, often I'm alone working on the garage in the car, and I just don't want to deal with having to do. If you've ever tried to do brakes where you're bleeding and you push on the brake pedal, you have to open up a valve and then close it again. I don't have two of me. So I'm just going to do it this way, and it'll still swap the fluids out. And that's just how fluid is done. I haven't even talked about coolant for the the coolant for the engine, because that's a separate video I'll do as well. But all the focus and emphasis on this is please, don't listen to people when they say, we're going to flush your transmission, it's going to be great. Because I promise you, it's not. If they don't even know the right fluid to put in, that's another problem. In fact, if I was a person, let's say I'm someone's grandma, or some, you could be a lady or a guy that doesn't want to work on your car, or whoever, and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I got to take it to a shop because I don't have a garage, but I don't want this to screw me over either. I would literally do this. I would buy exactly what the quantity is of this in a drain and fill, look it up online, buy like one more quart of that, put it in the car, and then take it to the shop and say, this is the stuff, I want the empty containers back, and I am going to tell you to put this stuff. in my transmission. This is the only thing I want. And I do not want it flushed. I just want you to do a drain and fill. And if they don't know what that drain and fill is, find a shop that does. Because a drain and fill is the only thing that Honda suggests to do. Do not have them flush it. Okay, you will be so sorry. And while some transmissions like Toyotas and Hondas are really built strong, they have to have the right thing. Just like humans and electrolytes. You get your electrolytes wrong, you're going to feel like crap. And that's just how it works. Our bodies are just made that way. So do yourself a favor, look it up online, figure it out, take it to someone. And if you want to do it yourself, like I said, I find that a drain and fill is actually faster for me than the oil. Because the oil, I got to change the filter. And with a drain and fill, a lot of these cars, like this one in particular, I think has a transmission pan. So to do this one, I think I'm going to actually have to pull the pan down. So this would be a bad example of a quick one. But on my wife's Pilot, that thing is like pull the plug, drains out, plug back in, pour more in. And the only trick with that is it's a pain in the neck to refill it. So I kind of made a little rig to pour some fluid in there through like this little like bottle. I'll have to show you the next time I do it. But essentially that's it. So if you have questions, you have comments, please go ahead and post them. Obviously, like and subscribe. I'm really trying to make this channel be something that people can use and look things up and go, okay, I agree with this guy. Because there's a lot of videos out there. There's a lot of guys that are, this is what they do for a living. This is not what I do for a living. I just hate working on stuff that's broken, and I don't want to work on stuff all the time. So I want to do it the right way, but I'm just another guy like you. I just want to get my car out of my garage so I can screw around and have fun with all the other stuff in life. Okay, there are other mechanics that are geniuses, and that's what they do for a living. But we can do it as a DIY. We can do it ourselves. This is easy. This is nothing magic. This is just a garage. This is just fluid. Okay, so finally, the last thing I'm going to say, just because it's an eco thing, don't dump your fluid on the ground. When you get your fluid and you're done with it, I believe this is still accurate. Last time, about 3 months ago, I still went to O'Reilly or AutoZone, one of the two, and they have this big old vat, and you go and say, hey, I need to dump some oil. And they will allow you to dump up to like 5 gallons of oil once per a certain interval. So that should be plenty and fine. And I usually just reuse my containers when I dump all this in for, like, let's say this was oil. I would dump this in, do my thing, drain and fill it back in with the old oil. And then I always put duct tape on this right here so I know this is garbage oil. So I don't have to reopen it up. And then I make a kind of a pile of it in the garage in their little containers, and I take it to O'Reilly and get it swapped out. So all that to say, thanks again for watching. And if you have any questions, please post them. If you have an experience, you're like, hey, I did this thing, I'd love to hear it because I want to know. Is this something that you think I'm right in? Do you totally disagree? I want to know because, again, like I said, I want to get this right. So I'll let you guys know how this car is when I get it done. I'll do another video for that. So thanks, everybody, and have a great day.